Studio Shaft was something of an under-the-radar studio during the late 90s and early 2000s, but slowly grew something of a cult following with the popularity of great shows such as Evertale Memories, Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei, and Hidamari Sketch. The studio established a reputation for their use of minimalist art and color design and unconventional cinematography, largely attributed to their head honcho Akiyuki Shimba. Most people will probably tell you, however, that the studio's first real smash hit was Magi Madoka in 2009. By fusing highbrow theming and imagery and presentation with lowbrow otaku-centric comedy, sexual artwork, and metaphors, the series managed to appeal to both niche consumers and mass-market penis bearers everywhere. The unbelievable success of this series may have been the catalyst that allowed Shaft's next big hit to have the incredible production it evidently needed. However, if you ask most people what the best show is by Shaft, if they don't say the Monogatari series, they will very likely answer 2011's Puella Magi Madoka Magica. I'm not trying to get my channel raped by Aniplex, so enjoy the sight of video games and stills for the rest of the video. Even though the start of Madoka works to make everyone and everything seem as simple and unremarkable as possible, the viewer can somehow sense that something's not quite right. The bright, gorgeous, and peppy artwork and character designs are occasionally interspersed with bleak, sinister, and intimidating imagery. The opening theme is equal parts high energy and dejected, exciting but melancholic. The show's excellent design only really becomes apparent when looked at with context, and this is doubly so when looking at the show's production. I'm pretty sure that most anime fans were wise enough to realize that Gen Rabuchi of Fate Stay Night fame wasn't going to write a normal-ass magical girl show. I mean, who would? How many popular anime studios put all of their talent and money into a traditional magical girl show without some type of twist? In this day and age, the likes of revolutionary girl Utena and Princess Tutu got attention from anime fans with their subversive, self-aware theming and presentation, which leads me to give my input on the whole deconstruction argument. Slowly but surely, more anime fans have been questioning the idea that Madoka Magica is truly a deconstruction of the magical girl genre, claiming that to state this is to believe the genre is much more insular than it actually is, and this I would half agree with, but I ultimately consider Madoka to be less of a deconstruction of the genre itself, but more the idea, and it achieves this by asking the fundamental question, what does it mean to be a magical girl, and therefore what does it mean to be a magical girl anime? Rather than flipping the entire transforming girls genre on its head, Madoka is more concerned with the stylings of classical magical girl anime for kids, such as Sailor Moon, Cardcaptor Sakura, and Heartcatch Precure. And the show at first presents itself with an identical structure. Madoka is a perfectly average girl who slowly gets wrapped up in an extraordinary set of circumstances. After she and her best friends are given the opportunity to become magical girls, she responds to this the same way any kid would in a show for children, sketching up costumes and thinking up catchphrases, without considering what this actually means. It isn't until the infamous third episode that the series truly bears its fangs, and everyone begins to realize the gravity of their situation. And with that said, I'm officially going into spoiler territory, so if for whatever reason you haven't seen this show yet, go do it now. Are you gone yet? Okay, good. The death of Mami was so massively impactful, not just by nature of a cast member dying, but because it happened in this show with this presentation. Madoka had built up a level of comfort and safety by this point, particularly since Mami was characterized as such a confident and motherly senpai. But more importantly, everyone reacts to the incident with the same level of trauma and terror that a real person would, and this feeling ripples throughout the rest of the series. A traditional magical girl series could have urgent or fatal situations, but very rarely with real-world emotional investment, and that is Madoka Magica's calling card. One of the major themes in this series is juxtaposition and subversion, of both tropes and expectations. The reason the show's technicolored yet subdued palette is so distinguished is because of how massively it conflicts with the show's tone and atmosphere. Speaking of which, Madoka Magica's production is incredible, fusing Shaft's artful design sense and attention to detail with some truly creative and diverse backgrounds and settings. The show's meticulous costume designs, high-quality fight scenes, and transformation sequences remind me that despite all the red herrings, Madoka is still very faithful to many key aspects of the magical girl genre. The show's near-future setting lends the series a very sleek and ergonomic quality, especially in regards to locations and architecture. And finally, the show has an excellent sense of scope and detailed shot composition to boost the grandiosity of the action and drama. I definitely consider it one of my favorite looking anime of all time, and the reason I'm putting so much of an emphasis on this is because it's kind of a big deal. The show can communicate so much emotion and meaning just through its excellent use of tone and cinematography. Madoka Magica could be considered something of a psychological thriller, and being able to relate the tension and anguish that the characters are feeling to the audience using multiple staging and manipulation of psychology is what separates the good shows from the great. Madoka doesn't need gratuitous gore and screaming to be effective. You need to understand how the audience thinks to really get in their head and leave a lasting impression on them, and Gen Rabuchi has demonstrated a number of times now that he knows how to move the audience. Countless moments in the series left me in awe at how tightly crafted they were. In one scene, Madoka slyly discusses her lingering feeling of responsibility for Sayaka to her mother over a drink. At this point, we've seen enough conflict and hurt feelings that this quiet, low-tempo scene between a mother and daughter probably shouldn't have been anything special, but it's all made special by such perfect presentation, such fantastic chemistry between the characters, such phenomenal sound design, sold by subtle and and emotional voice performances. It immediately cemented itself as one of my favorite scenes in the show, and this level of meticulous attention to detail and craftsmanship permeates throughout virtually every aspect of Madoka Magica's design. Madoka and her mother have clearly established an impenetrable level of trust and respect, which ends up paying off in a big way towards the end of the story. The genius of Madoka Magica's world building is how it at first coasts off traditional magical girl cliches, fighting evil witches in the name of love and peace. However, just like the show's characterization, it then creatively applies this to a harsher real-world setting. Most of the show's lore can be taken as an extended analogy. The witches represent depression. The more learned into a witch's control that a person becomes, the more lifeless and stoic they appear to the outside world. Deaths caused in a witch's labyrinth, which are fantastically animated by the way, are staged to look like suicides to bystanders, giving the story a distinct psychological edge. The magical girls fight the witches, but in turn harbor the stress and emotional turmoil of the witches themselves, in the form of depression. And once this becomes more than the girls can handle, they become witches. In other words, their biggest enemy is time, as their fates were sealed from the second they entered the contract with Kyubey. To combat this, magical girls need to take energy from the witches in order to sustain themselves and keep their soul gems clear, adding a level of selfishness and self-serving to their actions. As a magical girl, it is impossible to survive without taking as much as you give, which leads to the whole entropy reveal that Kyubey had been working towards. This results in foolish, lonely magical girls in the case of Mami, and cruel, systematic magical girls in the case of Kyoko. The reason it is impossible to reach any degree of stability in this state is because the system is inherently broken, not devised in a way that logically provides the magical girls with a worthy fate, a fact which only one of the girls manages to recognize. Hope and despair are another major theme in Madoka Magica, playing a pivotal role in every character's actions and motivations. Sayaka desperately hopes that she didn't make her decision to become a magical girl selfishly, and this hope is the only thing that sustains her over the course of the show. In making the wish that kicked off her contract, Sayaka was told by Mami not to make wishes for other people, suggesting that it would really be a wish in her own best interests. Sayaka decides to heal the boy she has a crush on, and for a while it seems that things are going to work out for her. However, we quickly realize that Sayaka is not a person that can work single-mindedly for others, nor is she anywhere near strong enough to shoulder the weight of her responsibilities. When she finds out another friend is making advances towards the guy she risked everything for, it slowly dawns on her that she made her wish entirely for herself, just as Mami warned her. With each new revelation from Kyubey and each new run-in with seemingly evil magical girls, she slowly loses faith that anything she does has any meaning. The only thing holding her together is the hope that maybe she can do some good. The straw that broke the camel's soul gem ends up being her witnessing some douchebags talking badly about their girlfriends, and in a very Shinji Ikari moment succumbs to the feeling that this was the humanity that she was fighting for, which ends up being more than she can take, finally giving into despair that had been festering inside of her. Mami Tomoe has banked her ability to fight on the hope that what she is doing is noble and just, donning a sweet and comforting demeanor thinly veiled over a profound sense of loneliness and isolation. The genius of Mami's design is once again something that can only be appreciated in retrospect, unlike her character design, which is gorgeous from episode 1. The viewer honestly knows nothing about this character at a first glance, let alone how horribly delusional she is. Homura struggles to even look her in the eye. This magical girl is so blissfully ignorant of the fact she's thrown her humanity away that she's actually seeking recruits. An alternate timeline reveals that Mami may have actually been the least capable of dealing with this knowledge. Mami actually has more lingering presence and impact on the narrative after her death, being the embodiment of the idea that magical girls aren't heroes but rather sacrifices. Kyoko Sakura is interesting because unlike the other characters, the means by which she sustains herself is by taking comfort in her lack of hope. Having seen the worst of humanity and lost her family due to her abilities, she's one of the characters that understands best that she is cursed rather than blessed. As a result, she's completely disillusioned by the start of the series and treats both her enemies and competition with equal levels of vitriol. This systematic approach to her work almost suggests that she embraces her lack of humanity as a means of maintaining her sanity, which understandably makes her appear evil to Madoka and Sayaka. Watching Sayaka prance around with all the energy, drive, and ignorance of a newly minted magical girl is not only frustrating to Kyoko, but somewhat intimidating, and eventually inspiring. After all, the last thing she wants to be is emotionally invested, but that's exactly what happens. Homura Akime is possibly the most interesting character, as her faith in her mission is the thing that perpetuates the cycle leading into the events of the series. Homura's one goal is to stop Madoka from making a contract with Kyubey and prevent her from signing her life away to horrific fate. Homura has lived the same scenarios over and over again, using her time manipulation abilities to restart the cycle every time Madoka concedes and is eventually killed. With each time repeat, the more disaffected Homura becomes to the people around her, which she does for a practical reason. Homura is the only character that strategically manages the quality of her soul gem, being well aware that if her hope in her mission wavers, she will become a witch. Episode 11 is completely dedicated to showing us all of the harrowing experiences that have led to the Homura we see throughout the series. Discovering Homura's motivations in this episode totally recontextualizes her actions earlier in the show, reminding the viewer just how little we knew about these characters going in. However, the more time she forces the magical girls to start over, the more powerful Madoka becomes, putting her abilities on a level far beyond anything the incubators ever could have predicted. This revelation, delivered by Kyubey, makes Homura incapable of carrying on, completely losing hope in the idea that what she was doing was helping Madoka. Also, let me just say that Kyubey is one of the most genius character concepts I've ever seen. He exists as something of a living embodiment of some of the show's most central themes, namely juxtaposition, for obvious reasons. Kyubey has the incredible power of turning you against others and yourself just through his speech alone. and is made so much more jarring and intimidating by his legendary vocal performance. There is one scene in which he tries to explain his motivations in a way that Madoka understands, outright horrifying her with his torturous and cruel philosophies and worldview. There's even a few instances of psychological rape. It's impossible for me not to appreciate how carefully written and executed this scene is, and it may be the moment of the show that best represents Kyubey's true manipulative nature. Genrobuchi liking Kyubey's state of mind to Al-Qaeda and bringing down the Twin Towers. He is incapable of understanding how what he is doing is anything but efficient, and just can't comprehend the ideals of humanity. Even though she doesn't know how to vocalize it, Madoka knows that what's happening is wrong, and Kyubey fails to sway her, which leads to an analysis of the relationship between Hope and Madoka, or rather that Madoka is Hope. Madoka Kaname has displayed strength of virtue far stronger than any of the characters from the very beginning. Regardless of the politics, she can innately feel that it is wrong for magical girls to be fighting one another, and the more she learns, the more resolute she becomes. Madoka has the firm moral backbone that Sayaka wishes she had, and maintains a constant level of responsibility for the magical girls. No matter how many times Homura warns her not to get involved, she cannot accept it. Madoka is uncompromising in her ideals, and never for a moment believe that anything good could come of violence and cruelty. She wants to save the magical girls, and upon realizing that it's impossible without the current system, she vows to destroy it. She will bring down every rule and rewrite every rule that stands in her way. Madoka achieves her potential and realizes her destiny by becoming a god. What Homura was really fighting with Madoka's destiny, once again giving an underlying selfishness to her actions. What Homura sees as a sacrifice, Madoka sees an affirmation. She ultimately evolves into a being transcending time, space, and matter, and perpetually defeating witches and existing as a concept. When Madoka speaks to Homura, she does so with a calm, comforting, almost meditative equanimity, giving us complete confidence that she knows what she's doing and is happy with it. And with that, the show ends, reminding the viewer that no matter what you are feeling, Madoka is fighting for you. One of the most important reasons that Madoka Magica is one of my favorite anime is similar to Gurren Lagann. It feels like a legend being relayed to the viewer, complete with a perfect and logical conclusion, a timeless tale with a simple message but presented so brilliantly that it takes on several new layers of meaning. I've heard a few people say that despite working fantastically within the context of the series, the cast definitely wouldn't be strong enough to carry a more character-driven series, and while I kind of agree with this, I wouldn't hold that against them whatsoever. Each character in this series to me is a piece of the puzzle, a moving cog in a larger mechanism. They all serve their role in the show's narrative fantastically and have so many layers that every time I watch this series I'm giving new things to think about. I wouldn't say that any of them individually are among my favorites in anime, but as a unit they're definitely among my favorite casts. With that said, I don't think I can name a one-core series so phenomenally dense and rich with things to enjoy and appreciate. I've watched this series twice, and on the second sitting I remembered virtually every scene, since every episode is so crammed with memorable lines, set pieces, and meaningful interactions. It's all highlighted by a beautiful soundtrack and consistently high-quality animation. With all things considered, Puella Magi Madoka Magica is one of my all-time favorite anime experiences, and definitely my favorite Shaft show. I keep jumping between this and Psycho Pass for my favorite work by Genrobuchi, but right now I'm kind of feeling inclined to this. Anyway, since the show is so well known, everybody seems to have an opinion or interpretation of it, so be sure to share those in the comments so we can all bicker about cartoons like the fine skulls we are.